The reservation was already confirmed when I arrived. It included a check-in window, a departure date, and an automated instruction not to contact the property after 9 p.m. I followed the instructions because there was nothing in them that suggested I shouldn't. I returned to my hometown for a short vacation over the New Year's holiday. I hadn't lived there in years. My brothers were still there. A few friends were still there. The plan was simple: eat, catch up, leave. I didn't want to stay with family. I didn't want to be absorbed into someone else's routine. I booked the only place that showed availability within reasonable distance of town. The listing wasn't detailed. It had no photos, just an address, a phone number, and a name field that read like a placeholder: hotel. The confirmation email contained a block of text that looked copied and reused. Key pickup, lobby, do not knock, no contact after 9 p.m. Check-in constitutes acceptance. I assumed it was an old building with minimal staffing, a family place that didn't update anything but still took money through a site because it was easier than answering calls. I arrived a little after 11 p.m. The hotel sat off a gravel highway set back behind dead grass and an unmarked lot. One light was on above the entrance. There was no visible sign. The building looked like a large house retrofitted into something commercial. There was only one vehicle in the lot, an older truck parked far from the door, angled slightly as if it had been left without intention to move again. Inside, the lobby was dim. A single lamp behind the counter lit the space. The air smelled like heat and age, not rot, not mold, just the stale presence of something that ran continuously without interruption. An older man stood up from a chair behind the counter when I walked in. He moved like someone who had been sitting for a long time. He also looked startled, like he wasn't expecting anyone to appear. I gave my last name. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for a card. He pulled a thick ledger from beneath the counter, not a computer, a book. He ran a finger down one page and stopped. Then he reached under the counter again and placed a key on the desk. The key tag was white plastic. It was not labeled with a room number. It was labeled with a date, January 1st. He slid a paper receipt beside it. My name was printed correctly. The dates matched my booking, December 31st through January 3rd. The payment line read paid. I looked at the key tag again. You label keys by date? I asked. He didn't answer. He pointed down the hallway. End, he said. Last door. That was the entire check-in. No welcome, no amenities list, no warning. The transaction felt complete in the way a procedure feels complete, like the building had accepted input and produced output. I took the key and walked down the hall. The carpet was old but vacuumed. The walls were painted a tired off-white. Framed landscape prints hung at identical height, all slightly crooked. They looked like someone had tried to straighten them once, then stopped. My room was the last door. The key opened it immediately. Inside was a bed, a dresser, a TV mounted too high, and a bathroom with a single bar of soap and 2 folded towels. The room was clean enough to be functional. It also felt unused, as if nobody had occupied it recently. I locked the door. I set the chain. I left my bag near the bed and slept. I woke at 3:12 a.m. to a sound in the hallway. A dull impact against wood, then a pause, then another impact. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't random. The rhythm was measured, like someone was testing something the same way each time. It went on for a few cycles, then stopped. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear voices. I waited long enough to confirm it wasn't my door, then went back to sleep. In the morning, I went to the lobby out of habit, expecting at least a coffee machine. The lobby was empty. The lamp was off. The chair behind the counter was pushed in. The ledger was not visible. There was no coffee station and no sign indicating hours. The front door was unlocked. The building was active without showing any operator. I stood there briefly. Nobody appeared. I left to see my brothers. The day was normal. Food, conversation, familiar streets. I didn't mention the hotel until late afternoon. It didn't sound serious. It sounded like the kind of oddness you tolerate in a town that never upgrades. I returned that night around 9:30. The lot was empty except for the old truck, still parked the same way. Inside, the lobby was darker. Not just dim. Darker, as if the lamp had been turned off intentionally to reduce what could be seen. I walked down the hall toward my room. Halfway down, I heard the sound again. A low thud against wood. A pause. Another thud. This time it came from close by. From the door directly beside my room. I stopped. I hadn't paid attention to that door the first night. It didn't have a number. It looked like the other doors, but slightly more worn around the handle, as if it was used more often. The door was cracked open by an inch. I stared at the gap, waiting for it to widen. It didn't. Then a voice spoke from the far end of the hallway. "Come down," the older man said. His tone was neutral, not urgent, not angry. A reminder. I didn't answer. I stood still. When I looked back at the door beside mine, it was closed now. I hadn't heard it close. I unlocked my room, stepped inside, and locked it again. Chain included. I didn't sleep immediately. I listened. The building stayed silent. Just after midnight, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered because I assumed it was one of my brothers. There was no voice, no breathing, just a faint hum like an open line. Then a synthetic voice spoke, calm and flat. "Wake-up call scheduled," it said. Then the call ended. I stared at my phone. There was no phone in the room, no front desk extension. No way the building should have been calling me except through whatever number I had used on the booking site. I didn't call back. The confirmation email had been explicit about contact after 9 p.m. It read like a rule. So I complied. I slept. In the morning, I stepped into the bathroom and stopped. On the counter beside the sink was a toothbrush. Not mine. The wrapper had been opened neatly and folded back in place. The toothbrush handle was damp. There was a small travel shampoo bottle beside it, half used, with a brand name I didn't recognize. The towels were untouched. The trash was empty. The shower mat was still dry. Nothing else indicated housekeeping. Only the toothbrush. I stood there long enough to confirm what I already knew. I had not brought a toothbrush. I had brushed the night before with soap in my finger because I didn't want to drive into town for a store at midnight. Now the room contained evidence of someone else's routine. I left it where it was and went into town later that morning to buy basic items. Toothbrush included. I kept the receipt. It was a habit, not a plan. That night before bed, I placed a thin strip of tissue under the door, pinched between the carpet and the wood. If the door opened, the tissue would tear or shift. I set the chain again. Then I slept. I woke at 2:47 a.m. The tissue was torn. The chain was unlatched. My toothbrush, the new one I had left in my toiletry bag, was no longer in the bag. The bag was still zipped. The toothbrush was on the bathroom counter, wet. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear movement in the room. The building remained silent, as if the act of entering did not produce sound because it was not considered a disruption. My phone rang. No number. I answered. The synthetic voice spoke one sentence. "Wake-up call completed." Then it disconnected. I stood in the bathroom and looked at the toothbrush. My own toothbrush, freshly bought, placed as if it belonged there, with moisture that suggested it had been used recently. I turned the faucet on, washed my hands, and put the toothbrush back in my bag. I zipped the bag and set it on the dresser where I could see it. Then I sat on the edge of the bed until morning. I went to the lobby early. The older man was there, seated behind the counter. The lamp was on again. The space looked reset, as if nighttime wasn't part of its official operation. I placed the key tag on the counter. "Someone came into my room," I said. He stared at the key tag, not at me. Then he shook his head. "No," he said. "I marked the door," I replied. He opened the ledger without asking. He turned it slightly toward me, enough for me to see one page. It listed dates down the left column. Next to each date were lines for arrival and departure, and a column labeled key. My name was written on the line for January 1st. Below it, on January 2nd, there was another name I didn't recognize. On January 3rd, another. Next to some entries was a small check mark in the key column. I pointed at my name. "What is that check mark?" I asked. He looked where I pointed. "Confirmed," he said. "Confirmed what?" He didn't answer. He turned his head slightly, looking past me toward the hallway as if checking something that wasn't visible. I looked around the lobby again and noticed a laminated sign mounted behind the counter. I hadn't seen it before, possibly because the lobby had been dark when I was present at night. The sign read, "Rooms are assigned by date. Do not exchange keys. Do not enter a room outside your date. Check-in is acceptance. Key date is active only." I read it twice. Then I looked at my receipt from the booking site, the one that listed my stay as multiple days. He watched me, waiting. "You gave me a key labeled January 1st, I said. "It's January," he replied, as if that resolved the discrepancy. "My reservation is through the 3rd. He opened a drawer and removed another printed slip already prepared. He placed it beside my receipt. It was titled, "Extended Stay Notice." It listed my name, my booking dates, and a line that felt like it had been written by someone trying to prevent this exact conversation. "Stay extensions do not override key date. Guests are responsible for compliance." He tapped the last line once. "Responsible," he said. I understood what he was telling me without him stating it directly. The booking site sold stays as a range. The hotel operated by date. The key tag wasn't a label. It was a boundary. And if I remained in a room outside its active date, I would not be trespassing in a way that required confrontation. I would be out of compliance, and the building would correct that the way it corrected everything else. Quietly, automatically, and without explanation. "What happens when the date changes?" I asked. He reached under the counter and placed another key beside the first. "January 2nd. Room closes," he said. "You move." "Where?" He pointed down the hall. "Middle," he said. He didn't ask if I wanted to. He didn't offer a refund. He offered the next procedural step. I took the key. Not because I trusted him. Because I wanted the only thing the building seemed to recognize: correct compliance. That night I packed everything. I didn't leave toiletries out. I didn't leave my bag open. I treated my room like it was already closing. I went out with my brothers, kept conversation normal, and returned just after midnight. The lobby was empty. The lamp was on, but no one sat behind the desk. A digital clock behind the counter showed 12:03 a.m. I walked down the hallway. When I passed my original room, I noticed the handle was wrapped with a thin strip of plastic tape, the kind used for evidence or closure notices. There was no writing on it, just tape, placed neatly across the seam of the door. It wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. I didn't touch it. I walked to the room the man had pointed out and inserted the key labeled 01/02. It opened on the first turn. Inside, the layout was nearly identical. Bed, dresser, TV, bathroom. On the bed was a folded towel with a paper slip on top. Printed, not handwritten. "Welcome. Date active. Wake-up call. 2:47. Departure 12 o'clock. Signature required." Below that was a blank line. No name, No ID request, just a line. I did not sign it. I set it on the dresser. I checked the bathroom. There was a toothbrush on the counter, still packaged, sealed, new. That was the first time I felt something close to relief. Not emotional relief, just confirmation that the room was in a state the system recognized. No used items, no evidence of overlap. I slept. At 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. No voice, just a single confirmation tone, then silence, then the call ended. In the morning, I left the room before noon. I placed the key on the counter. No one was there to receive it. I left. 2 days after returning home, I got an email from the booking site. The subject line was generic. Update on your stay. The body stated that the property had reconciled the reservation and adjusted charges accordingly. A refund was issued for part of the stay. The property message field contained one line of text: duplicate stay, system error, key date conflict, charges reversed. Attached was a PDF receipt from the hotel, not the booking site, the hotel. My name was printed correctly. The dates were listed. The line items were basic. The total was reduced. At the bottom was a section labeled Status. Room status, closed reopen date, January 4th. Key tag issued, January 4th. I stared at the last line for a long time because I wasn't scheduled to be there on January 4th. I hadn't booked anything for January 4th, but the system had issued a key tag in my name anyway, as if my compliance had created a future expectation. And that was the part I couldn't file away as a strange, run-down motel doing sloppy work. Not the used toothbrush, not the night call, not the taped door, the language, not reserved, not available, not requested, issued. As if I had been processed into the next date and the building was still waiting for me to show up and complete it. Some of these stories continue because people keep encountering the same systems. If you want to hear the next ones, staying subscribed is how they reach you. The access code was valid when I arrived. It unlocked the door, deactivated the alarm, and logged my entry time without requiring confirmation. The instructions indicated that no further action was necessary. The cabin belonged to my parents. They had owned it for years and used it a few times each winter. It sat several hours south of the city, surrounded by forest and separated from the nearest road by a long gravel drive. The property wasn't isolated in a dramatic sense. It was simply distant enough that nothing passed by unless it was meant to be there. That year, the plan was to meet there for a short holiday visit. I was arriving first. My parents and my sister would follow the next day. I decided to come early and stay one night alone. The instructions for entry were emailed to me that morning. They were brief. Arrival permitted after 2 p.m. Alarm disables automatically. Doors should remain locked when not in use. There was no mention of neighbors, no mention of caretakers, no contact number listed. The email ended with a single line: cabin status, ready. I arrived just before sunset. The driveway was clear. The porch light was on. The door unlocked immediately when I entered the code. Inside, the cabin was clean and arranged exactly as I remembered. Furniture in its usual place. No signs of recent use beyond basic preparation. The thermostat was set to a moderate temperature. The fireplace was cold. No lights were on inside. I unpacked, ate a simple dinner, and locked the door before going to bed. The night passed without interruption. In the morning, I made coffee and reviewed the property checklist my parents had sent me years ago, mostly out of habit. It was informal. Things like lock doors, turn off lights, don't leave food out, keep the fire screen closed. Nothing unusual. I planned to take a short walk around the property before my family arrived. There was a footpath that looped through the trees and rejoined the driveway. We had walked it dozens of times over the years. There was snow on the ground, not deep, enough to show disturbance. I locked the cabin door behind me. The path was quiet. The forest wasn't particularly dense, but visibility dropped quickly once I was away from the clearing. I followed the trail for several minutes before noticing footprints ahead. They were human, not boot prints from old snow. Fresh impressions, crisp at the edges. The tread pattern wasn't one I recognized. They followed the path in the same direction I was walking. I stopped. The prints didn't alarm me immediately. The property wasn't fenced. It was possible someone else owned land nearby. Hunters occasionally passed through during certain seasons. Still, I hadn't seen any vehicles, and the instructions hadn't mentioned anyone else accessing the area. I followed the prints for another minute before deciding to turn back. There was no reason to continue. On the way back, I noticed something else. Another set of footprints. These were fresher. They were angled slightly differently, closer to the edge of the path, as if someone had stepped aside to let another person pass. The two sets converged briefly, then continued together. I didn't follow them. I returned to the clearing and froze. The snow in front of the cabin door was disturbed. Footprints led directly up to the porch. They were the same pattern I had seen on the trail. They stopped at the door. There were no prints leading away. I stood there longer than necessary, reviewing the layout of the clearing and the snow coverage, trying to identify any logical explanation that didn't require additional assumptions. The snow was undisturbed everywhere else. I unlocked the door and went inside. The interior looked unchanged. The temperature was the same. Nothing appeared out of place. I locked the door and checked the windows. All secured. I called my parents. They told me to leave if I felt uncomfortable. My mother suggested a hotel in the nearest town. My father suggested I stay inside and lock everything. I chose the second option. It required less deviation from the plan. I spent the day inside. I didn't turn on the television. I kept the fireplace unlit. I read until I lost focus, then cleaned the kitchen even though it was already clean. At some point, I noticed the cabin felt warmer. I checked the thermostat. It was set higher than before. I didn't remember adjusting it. I turned it back down. Later, I found it raised again. I assumed the system was recalibrating. By evening, the snow outside had hardened enough that any new disturbance would be visible. I waited until dark. Before going to bed, I checked the doors and windows again. All locked. I did not place furniture against the doors. I didn't want to create unnecessary noise if I needed to move quickly. I slept lightly. I woke to the sound of movement inside the cabin. Not footsteps, not voices. A subtle shift, like fabric being adjusted. I sat up and listened. Nothing followed. I checked the time. 2:18 a.m. I stayed awake for another hour without hearing anything else. In the morning, I noticed the fireplace. Ash was scattered across the hearth. The fireplace screen was open. I had not lit a fire. The ash was cold. There was no soot on the logs, no smell of smoke. The disturbance looked minimal, as if someone had knelt in front of the fireplace and brushed against it accidentally. I didn't clean it. I took photos instead. I sent them to my parents. They didn't respond immediately. I checked the doors, locked. I checked the windows, locked. The footprints outside were still there. No new ones. At midday, my parents texted to say they were delayed. Weather, traffic. They would arrive the next morning instead. They asked if I wanted to leave. I considered it. Leaving would have been simple. Pack the car, drive away. No confrontation, no explanation required. Staying meant accepting that something had already happened and continuing as if it hadn't. I stayed. That night, I locked myself into the bedroom rather than sleeping on the couch. The bedroom door had a lock, It was thin, but it existed. Before sleeping, I placed my shoes directly in front of the door. If the door opened, they would move. I slept. I woke to the sound of the bedroom door opening. The sound was quiet, controlled. The shoes slid slightly across the floor. I didn't move. I kept my breathing steady and waited. The door did not open fully. It paused. Then it closed again. The shoes were returned to their original position. I waited until morning. In daylight, the cabin felt normal again. The fireplace was undisturbed. The thermostat had not changed. No new footprints appeared outside. I reviewed the entry email again. Cabin status, ready. I wondered what that meant operationally, ready for whom? When my parents arrived, I didn't tell them everything at once. I mentioned the footprints, the ash, the thermostat. They checked the property. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged windows. My father suggested an animal. My mother suggested we were overthinking it. They stayed the night. Nothing happened. On the third day, I left early for work obligations. My parents and sister remained. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was careful. She asked if I had left anything behind. I said no. She told me they had found evidence of someone using the cabin while they were there. Not at night, during the day. A door unlocked that should have been locked, a chair repositioned. The thermostat adjusted while everyone was outside. They searched the cabin thoroughly. They found nothing. That night, my parents locked all doors and windows and slept in the same room. In the morning, the front door was unlocked. No footprints in the snow. They contacted a local caretaker listed in old paperwork. He came by later that day. He found no damage, no signs of forced entry. He did find one thing: a log sheet in a drawer near the breaker panel. It was a printed form filled out by hand. Dates, times, initials. My father didn't remember seeing it before. The caretaker told them it was standard, used to document access during maintenance or inspections. The last entry was dated the morning after I left. It listed an arrival time and a departure time. The initials did not match the caretaker's. The caretaker said he hadn't been there that day. He crossed out the entry and initialed it himself. He told my parents it was probably a clerical mistake. The cabin was still usable. Weeks later, my parents received an automated email from the property management service they had used years earlier and forgotten about. The service confirmed recent activity at the cabin and asked them to review access logs for accuracy. The email ended with a sentence that didn't prompt a response. Unscheduled access has been resolved through normalization. My parents stopped using the cabin that winter. They never sold it. They never formally closed it. The systems still operate. The code still works. And according to the service, the cabin remains ready. The route was generated automatically. It provided an estimated arrival time, a fuel stop suggestion, and a warning that rerouting could delay completion. Once I accepted it, the guidance continued without requiring further input. I was on a short vacation drive, the kind I do when I want distance more than destinations. I had picked a small coastal town as an endpoint because it was easy to justify to myself: a night in a cheap motel, dinner, a walk the next morning, then back. The navigation app chose the route. I didn't argue with it. It wasn't the fastest, but it was marked as reliable, and that word did most of the persuading. I left early enough that I didn't expect to be driving after dark. The first hour went normally. The road widened and narrowed when it was supposed to. The estimated arrival time adjusted in small increments, as it always does. I watched it occasionally, not because I was anxious, but because it was a habit. Then around the second hour, the estimate stopped adjusting. It remained a fixed number. 2 hours, 11 minutes I kept driving. I assumed the app had lost signal temporarily and would correct itself when it regained it. My phone still showed service. Music streamed without interruption. Calls could be made. Nothing else looked wrong. 10 minutes later, it still read 2 hours, 11 minutes. The little car icon on the map still moved. The blue guidance line remained. The route was still being followed. But the time estimate did not shift. I looked at the distance remaining. It did shift, but only slightly and not in a way that matched how long I had been moving. I didn't turn around. I told myself it was a display issue. Then I passed a sign I recognized, not as a famous landmark, just as something my brain flagged as familiar. A faded advertisement for a local towing company, a specific phone number, a poorly painted slogan. I had seen it earlier. That was my first real irregularity, not the frozen time estimate, but the sensation of repeating physical information in a place where repetition didn't make sense. I watched for the next sign. A mile later, I saw it. The same towing advertisement, same number, same slogan, same damage on the metal. I checked my speed. Normal. I checked the map. It insisted I was progressing. I checked the clock. Time was passing normally, but the road had started behaving like it had a loop embedded in it. I did not stop. I did not pull over. I did not call anyone. I kept driving because the app kept offering certainty, and certainty is hard to abandon when nothing else is offering an alternative. Then the low fuel warning came on. I hadn't expected it yet. I had filled up that morning. My car's range should have covered more distance than I had supposedly traveled, but I wasn't tracking it closely enough to challenge it with confidence. The navigation app immediately pushed a suggestion. Fuel stop required, except to continue route. A single button appeared, accept. It wasn't a question. It was a gate. I tapped it. The route adjusted by less than a mile. The estimated arrival time remained 2 hours, 11 minutes. A few minutes later, a gas station appeared ahead on the right. It looked ordinary in structure and placement, but there was no other development around it. No cluster of buildings, no houses, no visible side road leading to anything. Just a station on an otherwise empty stretch. I pulled in. There were 2 pumps. One worked. One was marked out of service with a printed sheet taped to it. A single car sat near the side, parked as if it had been left quickly. The doors were closed. No one was inside. I went to the door of the station. It opened with a bell that didn't ring. The interior was lit, but not warmly. Fluorescent light with a slight flicker. The shelves were stocked in a way that looked correct at a glance, but wrong if I looked too long. Items were lined up, but labels faced inconsistently. Some sections had duplicates of the same product in neat rows, like a display that had been rebuilt from memory. A man stood behind the counter. He looked tired, middle-aged, ordinary. I asked for a gas can because I didn't fully trust the pump. He pointed to a shelf without speaking. I took a red can, brought it back, and asked if the pump took card. He nodded once. I went outside. The pump accepted my card. It did not ask for a zip code. It did not print a receipt. It simply ran. I watched the numbers climb. They climbed fast, faster than normal. I stopped the pump and looked at the gallon count. It didn't match what I expected for the amount of fuel I should have burned. I restarted it anyway. I filled my tank. Then, because the pump had offered a recommended amount, I filled the gas can too. It felt like the correct thing to do. The system had asked for a fuel stop. I wanted to complete it fully. When I returned to the counter, the man had a receipt already printed. He didn't hand it to me directly. He placed it on the counter and pushed it toward me. I glanced down. The receipt had my card's last 4 digits, the total and the time. It also had a line I didn't recognize as standard for gas stations. Route continuation, approved below. That was a small number. Session 03. I looked up to ask what that meant. The man was looking past me toward the door like he was monitoring something outside. I followed his eyes. Through the front window, I could see my car. The headlights were on. I had turned them off. I was sure I had. I walked out and checked. The lights were on. The engine was not running. The keys were in my pocket. I turned the headlights off and got in. The navigation app displayed a new instruction immediately. Return to route. Do not deviate under it was the same arrival estimate. 2 hours, 11 minutes I pulled out of the station and back onto the road. Within 10 minutes, the towing company sign appeared again. Same sign, same number, same damage. I didn't slow down. I didn't look away. I kept my eyes forward and treated it like a normal object because I didn't want to give my brain room to build an explanation. Then the app chimed. Route interruption detected. Correcting. I hadn't interrupted anything. I was doing exactly what it told me. But the message appeared anyway, and the route line on the map shifted slightly as if it had snapped back into place. A mile later, I saw another gas station on the right. It was the same station, same 2 pumps, same taped out of service sign, same parked car near the side. I passed it without stopping. My fuel gauge was full. The app chimed again. Fuel stop required, except to continue route. I stared at the screen. I had just fueled. The app did not care. A single button appeared. Accept. I did not tap it. For the first time, I tried to override the system. I hit end route and attempted to set a new destination, a town in the opposite direction, back toward where I came from. The app accepted the input and displayed a new route. Different line, different roads. Then, after a few seconds, a banner appeared across the top of the screen. Route unavailable. Complete current session first. Under it, the map returned to the original route. The estimate remained. 2 hours, 11 minutes. I tried a different app. Same result. The moment I entered a destination, it attempted to route me. Then a similar message appeared. Not the same wording, but the same function. It would not allow a new route without completing the current one. I considered that it was a phone issue, a software issue, a service issue, something that could be fixed by shutting down the device. So I turned my phone off. The road continued. For a few minutes, nothing changed. Then a digital roadside sign appeared ahead. An electronic board, the kind used for construction warnings or closures. It was blank when I first saw it. Then as I approached, text appeared. Navigation required. Enable device. I kept driving past it. A mile later, another sign. Device offline. Route incomplete. I didn't accelerate. I didn't brake hard. I simply drove. I turned my phone back on. The navigation app opened automatically to the route screen. The map loaded before other apps finished. A message appeared. Session resumed. Then the fuel stop message returned. Fuel stop required, except to continue route. I had enough gas, I knew that, but the route was now structured around compliance, not necessity. I tapped accept. The route line adjusted slightly as if acknowledging the action. A new instruction appeared. Stop at next available station. Within 5 minutes, the same station appeared again. I pulled in. This time, the parked car near the side was gone. A different vehicle sat there instead, positioned differently but occupying the same space, like the spot itself mattered more than who used it. I went inside. The same man was behind the counter. He didn't greet me. He didn't ask what I needed. He simply produced a receipt and placed it down, face up, before I had purchased anything. The top line read, Route continuation, approved. The lower line read, Session 04. I stared at it. I hadn't pumped gas, I hadn't swiped my card. The receipt had my card's last 4 digits anyway. I looked up at him. He was watching me with no expression that suggested concern. I asked, "What is this?" He answered, "Approved." I asked, "Approved for what?" He pointed at the door, not aggressively, not hurried, just direction. I walked out. My headlights were on again. I turned them off. I got in the car. The app chimed. Continue, I drove. The next hour unfolded with the same pattern. The estimate did not change. The scenery did, but it did so in a way that felt interchangeable. Trees, then open field, then trees again. A bridge that looked like the last bridge. A turn that felt like I had already taken it. At one point, I saw an abandoned sedan far off the shoulder near the tree line. It did not look like a crash. It looked placed. The driver's door was slightly open. I passed it without stopping. A few miles later, I saw another abandoned sedan, same model, same color, same open door. Placed again. The third time I saw it, I realized it might be the same car repeating, the way the towing sign repeated and the gas station repeated. Then I noticed something else. My odometer wasn't tracking the way it should. It moved, but too slowly, as if time and distance were being recorded at different rates depending on whether I complied. I tested it in the only simple way I could. I turned off the navigation voice prompts. Immediately, a banner appeared. Voice prompts required. Enable for safety. I left them off. A minute later, my phone volume turned itself back up. The prompts resumed. I turned them off again. The car's dashboard warning lights flickered once. Not a single light. Multiple. A brief coordinated flash like a system check. Then everything returned to normal. I did not turn the prompts off again. Eventually, the road delivered me to a toll point. There shouldn't have been a toll point. Not on that kind of road, not in that area. But it was there, a simple structure with lanes and sensors. No person in a booth, no line of cars, just an overhead frame and a digital display. As I approached, the display lit up with text. Session 04. Payment required. My phone chimed. A payment screen appeared. It already had my card loaded. It displayed a single amount and 2 buttons. Pay, cancel. I hit cancel. The screen did not close. The display above the lane changed. Payment required. No bypass. I hit cancel again. My car slowed as if it had encountered a headwind. The engine didn't fail. It simply felt resistant, like driving through heavy drag. That was the first time the system interacted with my vehicle in a way that wasn't mediated by my phone. I hit pay. The drag disappeared. A green arrow lit above the lane. The overhead display updated. Payment received. Continue. My phone showed a digital receipt. It included the amount, the time, and again that word. Session. I continued through. After the toll point, the road became more defined. Lines were clearer, signs looked newer. For a few minutes, the route felt like it was approaching something real. Then the estimate finally changed. Not downward, upward. 2 hours 11 minutes became 2 hours 43 minutes. Then it went back to 2 hours 11 minutes. Then it became 2 hours 11 minutes with a new line beneath it. Arrival on completion. I didn't like that phrasing. It suggested arrival was not a place. It was an outcome. A few miles later, the app spoke without being prompted. Proceed to checkpoint. I hadn't seen the word checkpoint before. Then I saw a small turnout ahead with orange cones. Not construction, just cones. A narrow funnel leading into a side lane. A sign beside it read, checkpoint, all routes. I pulled into the lane. There was no officer, no attendant, no building. A camera sat on a pole. A sensor plate was embedded in the road. As I rolled forward, my phone vibrated. A screen appeared. Verify presence. A single button. Verify. I tapped it. The next screen appeared, Verify Fuel. It showed a progress bar and instructed, Keep engine running. I kept it running. The bar filled. Then, Verify Compliance. Another progress bar. It filled. Then the screen displayed, Session Complete. The overhead sign above the lane, which had been blank, now displayed, Thank you, a green arrow lit. I returned to the road. For the first time since the estimate froze, it updated normally. 1 hour, 58 minutes. That number dropping felt more unsettling than it should have because it proved that the system had been capable of normal behavior the entire time. It had simply chosen not to provide it until compliance milestones were met. The rest of the drive proceeded without loops. I arrived at my motel before dark. The check-in was automated, a kiosk, a card reader, a room key dispenser. The screen asked for my name, then printed a key packet. Inside the packet was a receipt and a small slip that looked like an informational notice. It read, Thank you for completing Session 04. Session 05 will be available at next departure route continuation. Enabled. I stared at that slip longer than the motel clerk would have if there had been one. I hadn't signed up for any session system. I hadn't agreed to route continuation beyond getting to my destination. But the slip treated the drive as part of a series and my arrival as a step completed, not a conclusion. I slept. The next morning I decided to leave immediately. Not because I was panicked, because I didn't want to start something else. I got in my car and turned it on. Before I touched my phone lit up. A notification appeared on the screen without me opening any app. Session 05 ready. Departure window active. Under it were 2 buttons. Begin postpone. I tapped postpone. The notification disappeared. A few seconds later it returned. Session 05 ready. Begin required. I tried to force close the app. I restarted my phone. When it turned back on, the route screen was open already. A new estimate displayed, 2 hours, 11 minutes, and beneath it, return route. Completion required. I sat in the parking lot and stared at it. It wasn't telling me where to go. It was telling me what I owed. I didn't begin. I didn't postpone. I left the motel parking lot and drove in the opposite direction without any navigation. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then I passed a digital roadside sign near the highway on-ramp. It displayed, device offline, route incomplete. Another sign a mile later, Session 05, unstarted. Then my fuel gauge dipped more quickly than it should have, not emptying instantly, just declining at a rate that didn't match my driving. My phone vibrated again. Fuel stop required, except to continue route, a single button, except I didn't tap it. I pulled off into a busy town and parked in a grocery store lot where other people were present, where the environment would resist becoming procedural. I turned my phone off. I went inside, bought a charger cable, and sat in my car with the phone still off until I decided what to do. Eventually, I turned it back on and opened my email. There was a new message. No subject line, just a blank header. In the body was a single sentence. Session 05 remains available. Attached was a receipt, not for fuel, not for the motel, for the toll payment. It now included an additional line at the bottom. Next session, pending departure window. Open. I didn't drive back the way I came. I took surface roads, ignored my phone entirely, and burned time until the day felt like it belonged to me again. When I got home, I checked my card statements. The toll charge was there. So was something else, a $0 transaction labeled route continuation authorization. It wasn't a purchase, it wasn't a refund, it was a placeholder, like a file left open. And that was the only proof I kept, not a story about a road that loops or a gas station that repeats or signs that address you directly. Just an authorization that didn't close. as if the route was still running somewhere, waiting for me to begin the next session and finish what it had already started.